So ladies, gentlemen, Bat family out there, I've been doing some research, and that research involves you guys. So it's time to take a look and get down into the thick of it with regards to who you guys think should be the main villain for the Batman Part 2. And the results actually somewhat surprised me here out of the few thousand votes. And then by the end of this video, we'll get down to my pick out of the top Rogues Gallery members as well. I thought, you know what, given how long we've been talking about the Batman Part 2 with regards to villains, what I decided to do is just list the most rumored villains out there, reported by even that of the major press trades out there. I mean, if you guys know, you should know that there's been certain names cropping up again and again and again and again. All right, so let's get into this list. So, again on YouTube, at the time of making this video, 2,700 votes from you guys, and I do think that's like a big bulk of people, like those who are bothered enough to actually take part in the poll are probably the fans who really, you know, think about the sequel. So I can't say this reflects every single fan out there, but I do think that these votes are somewhat representative of a lot of the Batman fans when faced with these options. And I also say that because I hosted it on Twitter, the votes are very similar in general. Now, on Twitter, as I said, there's only 4 options. YouTube, there's 5. But the interesting aspect about this is we're going to go from least popular to most popular. And on YouTube, it kind of is going from 5 options to 4 options, because let's just say the least popular vote is joint at 8% each. And lo and behold, it's kind of representative of the least popular character on Twitter as well. So on Twitter, the least popular villain that people want to see at 10.8% is Clayface. And on YouTube, because I got to include another option here, joint 8% as least popular amongst the list is not only Clayface, but Professor Pig. Now, I found this pretty interesting, and this is what I mean by I'm kind of glad that I've done this as a video idea. I don't know how well this video will do, but I'll take any excuse to talk about Batman here on the channel, especially what I would call the video for me to just blabber about, okay, who do we want? But Clayface has been one of the most recurring names popping up out there, whether it's from scoopers or to that of major trades. And I emphasize major trades because sometimes, and rightfully so, a lot of you guys or just people out there in the fandom don't want to take scoopers too seriously because, yeah, they may get some things right, but also they get a lot of things wrong. But Clayface, I feel like, kind of transcended just the scooper realm because of those Hollywood Reporter articles, for example, going back to October of 2022. In fact, the first time that I heard about Clayface, I believe the first foundation of the rumor went back to the Penguin series. Just because he's voted the least popular here, that's something I need to stress as well. It doesn't mean that the less popular villains or Rogues Gallery members in this poll aren't actually going to turn out to be the future villains. But it still is the name that popped up most of all, yet it's voted the least popular here as for what you guys on the channel want to see as the Batman Part 2's villain. And I know I keep saying it, it just surprises me. Now, I wonder why this is the case. Maybe it's because I've hammered it in so much, not that I'm saying I've changed people's minds outright, but I have hammered it in a lot that if we are going to get a Clayface, it would most likely be a rendition or, like, you know, an influence from that of the Golden Age Clayface. And no, not the big blob monster. Now, I know lots of people still like to debate me on that, and feel free to do that. I'm not saying you can't believe that Matt Reeves will go fantastical, even though I've said 1,000 quotes as to why he himself has said that it's not really leaning into the fantastical as much. So maybe people have been put off by the idea that, okay, crap, maybe if Clayface was to be done in Reeves' universe, Matt Reeves would make him grounded to the point of where I would prefer to see that character in, let's just say, the DCU, in where we can embrace the fully fantastical elements. And that might be the same thing with a few villains on this list as per what you guys want to see. But I do want to heavily emphasize and heavily stress that just because Matt Reeves wants to make that work in his world, it doesn't mean that him redefining that character in a way that might walk the line of the fantastical, so being grounded but also being like, maybe that is slightly unrealistic there with the putty or makeup that Clayface puts on his Golden Age version adaptation that Matt Reeves is going for. Like, oh, we don't quite have that today. That is a way it can be done. So either way, enough rambling about Clayface, but I just didn't expect to see him with only 8% of the votes out of basically almost 3,000 votes. Now, Professor Pig joined 8% here with the votes. I don't have so much to say here about Professor Pig. This one doesn't surprise me because mainly he's just, another serial killer, granted one that I would love to see. Now, whenever I say stuff like this, it doesn't mean I don't like the character. Professor Pig, my God. I think one thing we all love about Batman, and some people might question us for it given how messed up some of these characters are, is that his villains are so damn creepy. Do you know what I mean? And Professor Pig getting into Dollartron territory, even Fox's Gotham's adaptation was really interesting. To imagine that in, Robert Pattinson's Batman facing off against him, it's something so easily imaginable, right? But I just don't think that the next villain is going to be a straight up serial killer. I'm not saying that killings or even serial killings aren't going to be done in part 2, but I just think that whatever is the reason as to why multiple killings could be taking place could be something subsequent to whatever the villain is doing. But Professor Pig would kind of just straight up be kind of just a creepy ass guy who's abducting people and wanting to do what he does. So up next, and this one doesn't surprise me. I would say yes, actually, especially, well, there's two ways of looking at this. I would say that the YouTube poll that I've done is the one that I look at the most here because it's got the most votes, so you get more of a pool of audience there to be like, I want this villain for part 2. Twitter is, only 741 votes. So I'll say, first of all, in third place, according to almost 3,000 of you, for who you want to be the Batman Part 2's villain, who fell behind at only 19%, is Scarecrow. And I say that shockingly, in my opinion, because of who's at second place and then first place. Well, first place is first place for a reason, and I kind of like that. But Scarecrow? At number 3, maybe I have, misplaced faith there because, the more I think about it right now, a lot of you have said, we saw Cillian Murphy in Nolan's Batman Begins and then kind of in very mini appearances in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Returns, but I feel like I've always clapped back to that. He wasn't like he had kind of obviously quite a prominent role in Batman Begins, but don't forget how long ago Batman Begins was. And even then, the larger story was the League of Shadows, Liam Neeson's Ra's al Ghul. And yeah, sure, Titans has done Jonathan Crane at a different kind of point in Batman's life. So where we visit Scarecrow, he's already run into Batman a bunch of times, so you don't even get like a fully fledged Scarecrow mask Scarecrow in Titans season 3. And then I guess maybe people feel like polluted with Scarecrow, and I put it that way because clearly people don't favor him as much to be the part 2 villain as much as the next two options. But through the Arkham games, obviously we had Scarecrow littered throughout those as well, and obviously mainly in Arkham Knight. But I don't know about you guys, but video game doesn't really count for me as a reflection of the overall audience because not everyone plays video games. I know that may sound crazy, but what I'm trying to convey there is there's plenty of Batman fans out there who might really want Scarecrow, but don't feel as diluted with that character as maybe some of you do, because you've seen him in, I don't know, the Harley Quinn animated series, you've seen him in Titans, you've seen him in the Arkham games, you've seen him in Batman Begins. But without rambling about that too much more, I just thought Scarecrow would be more popular. For me, another justification as to why I really want to see Scarecrow in a significant role, maybe even to that of Part 2's villain, is because it is out of fantastical options and out of grounded options that Matt Reeves can do. Well, Scarecrow is not only one of the coolest villains, I think that a lot of Batman fans do agree on, despite, ironically, this vote here. It is one of the most easiest ones to incorporate, and one of the ones out of the Rogues Gallery that fits in with Pattinson's, Matt Reeves' world so easily. Hallucinogenics are a thing. Shrooms, weaponized psilocybin or something like that could just be incredible. It could be incredible. Now, that is the YouTube poll in third place at 19%. But in third place, for the Twitter poll with the 741 votes, is Hush. Now, that's more what I expected, because Hush is a character, actually, in fact, Matt Reeves is one of Matt Reeves' favorite characters out of Batman's Rogues Gallery, and there's an interview out there somewhere where he says that himself, and he does stress, though, that doesn't mean, I'm doing Hush in the next movie, even though, funnily enough, again, this is why I chose these options as the votable options, one of the most talked about, especially, I would say, in that of the past, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, Hush has been popping up a lot more. But the reason why I thought that Scarecrow would be more popular than Hush in the YouTube poll is just because what a lot of people I read, a lot of you guys comment, I love it, please comment on this video. A lot of you say, oh, we've already seen that before, in the Batverse, or it'd be kind of too similar, is in fact what people say to the Riddler. Now, this gives away number 2 on my YouTube poll, because on Twitter, as we went over, 4th place for both YouTube and Twitter was Clayface, but also YouTube had the extra joint 8%, last place with Professor Pig. Then on YouTube, as we just went over, Scarecrow as 3rd place at 19%, but the 2nd place on Twitter was Scarecrow. But again, that's why I would say, even though Scarecrow came in at 25.8% in 2nd place out of those 741 votes, I would still probably look at the YouTube poll as more of an accurate representation, because you've just, basically almost got 3,000 votes there. Yeah, Scarecrow's in 3rd place. And yet, that's the shocking thing to me. People, despite seeing all of the feedback about Hush being, oh, we've already seen that with the Riddler, he's in 2nd place on the YouTube poll. And that's with far more votes. That's with so many more people voting. But I did say in the poll caption, try be realistic. Yeah, I don't quite know if people truly, I have to assume in good faith that Hush came in at 2nd place to almost 3,000 people because they really want Hush to be the villain of part 2. But I do just want to put it into some people's minds that maybe people expect Hush to be one of the more realistically announced, headlines for the casting of Batman Part 2's villain. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. One thing I disagree with is that Hush is just like the Riddler. We wouldn't see Hush because we've already seen him before. I don't get where people are getting that from. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any similarities. I want to make that clear. But let me put it this way. Riddler, in the Batman movie, wasn't a childhood friend of Bruce's. He doesn't blame everything on the Waynes for why his life turned out the way it did. It's more that he thought Thomas Wayne instructed Falcone to kill Edward Elliot. So, thus, for Paul Dano's Riddler in the first movie, he thought that the Waynes were a part of the problem that created this cesspool of a city, and thus, Bruce Wayne must die for the sins of his father. So that's not really comparable to the whole Tommy Elliot, vendetta or, the revenge thing that he has against the Waynes in the source material. I guess there can be an argument for a similarity in how Riddler could have yearned for what life Bruce had when he was in the Gotham orphanage. But if anything, Bruce was also an orphan too. And in the Riddler Year One prequel comic and in the movie, as Riddler said himself, it got into how he just viewed Bruce as this, sarcastically, living in some tower over the park isn't being an orphan, looking down on everyone with all that money. Don't you tell me, as he said. So it's more just like Riddler looking at Bruce as an orphan as well, being like, screw you, man, we have it worse. It's not really like Tommy Elliot yearning for the life that Bruce had as a kid, Bruce having his parents' approval and everything like that. So again, not really the same. It's scrutinizing their similar positions as children, possibly envious, but not putting everything, once again, on Bruce Wayne. Other than that, I suppose there's visual design. People compare that a lot. The Riddler's coat, I guess, in the movie, but his face being covered in the way it was, it's not bandaged, but is that all people are really gunning with here? Is that their ammunition for how, the Riddler in the Batman Part 1 was basically Hush? I don't know. I just don't think that Hush in the sequel would be like Batman Hush anyway. It would just be something new, not childhood friends of Bruce. I'm sure Matt Reeves would do something innovative. I would love to know what you guys think there. Again, I'm not saying there aren't similarities, but I do think Reeves would redefine Hush in the same way that I'm about to talk about with some other villains. Hush is second. Now, with that being said, first place, the most desired villain out there for the Batman Part 2. It hasn't changed. it hasn't changed. And both on Twitter with 741 votes, as I keep saying, and the YouTube poll with 2,700 votes from the biggest Batman fans, I'm sure, who took place in these votes. First place at 43% on YouTube and 41% on Twitter is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is still by a freaking avalanche the biggest and most desired villain to be seen in Matt Reeves' Batman trilogy, and in this case, the Batman Part 2. It's fascinating to me, and not in a bad way, because guess what? I've done a whole video, and I know I haven't done a video in that series for a long time, but I do have a series on the channel in where it's called the Rogues Gallery Adaptation Series, in where, from my understanding of what Matt Reeves would go for, I imagine how Matt Reeves could adapt any of the Rogues Gallery villains. And I've done one on how I believe Mr. Freeze could be adapted. And I think we can all understand it wouldn't be as fantastical as he is in the source material. Now, I do want to stress, and I've always stressed this, I don't think Mr. Freeze is as fantastical as some people say he is. Especially, that's not me saying he doesn't have fantastical elements to him, but especially compared to someone like Poison Ivy. I think we can agree there, you know, conjuring frickin' plants to fly her throughout Gotham City, bursting through the tarmac of the road. But it's just, it's almost warming to the heart in a way that ever since the Batman came out, people said Mr. Freeze back then, and they're still saying Victor Freeze right now. And I think I know why. Now, I know people watching this right now, maybe you right now, might be thinking, as per this user here, and I do think it's a comment to reflect a lot of people's mindsets, which is why I'm using it as an example. Why do people want Mr. Freeze so badly? He doesn't mesh with the grounded/serious tone that Reeves is going for. He might work in Gunn's DCU, but I think we would need to see the established tone for Batman in the DCU beforehand. So, once again, people thinking that if you did Ivy, Mr. Freeze in Matt Reeves' universe, it wouldn't be the character that most people have come to know and love, and that is the fully embraced fantastical side of that character. But I do disagree, hence why I've made that video. Granted, it won't be the exact same fully fledged potent version of fantastical Mr. Freeze that you guys may want, but I'm not the only one who thinks that. After all, Matt Reeves himself, in his own words. So to me, it would be a challenge in an interesting way to try and figure out how that could happen. Even the idea of something like Mr. Freeze. That's such a great story, right? And the key part here being, I think there's actually a grounded version of that story, which could be really powerful and could be really great. So in Matt Reeves' own words there, he also thinks there is a grounded version that can be done. It's just, I completely understand at the same time why people would only prefer to see that character in a way that would utilize every part of them from the source material and not really make any compromises from, let's just say, the cold gun to some kind of liquid nitrogen, dummy version of that. But I go back to what I said a second ago. I think I know why people vote Mr. Freeze as the most popular. And, again, back to the beginning of this comment here. Why do people want Mr. Freeze so badly? So after the Twitter poll ended, I said that Mr. Freeze is still the fan favorite with a clear win. And somebody commented, this user here, saying, one of Batman's most sympathetic villains. And I replied back saying, I think it says a lot about what the audience desires to see. A villain that would draw compassion from Pattinson's Bruce in the next installment, despite the challenges that he'll also face with Mr. Freeze, being in his way and whatever he is doing specifically in that plot, which I think we can all gather, and that will have something to do with his wife. And then another user replied to me saying, exactly, to me, Mr. Freeze represents Bruce learning that he needs to be a symbol of hope, not only to Gotham, but also to the villains he faces by having hope for their actual betterment. So far, Bruce has just faced villains who are clearly bad. He now needs a nuanced antagonist. And I agree. This is why I think Mr. Freeze, out of 2,700 votes, also combined with Twitter, over 3,000 votes, gets #1 most desired villain for the Batman Part 2. One thing that has been talked about again and again is that as much as we loved the serial killing thing with Riddler, and before that, it's really more evidence to the matter, even though we didn't see it during Batman Year One, Pattinson's Batman put away another serial killer, Joker. So are we really just going to go for this is, going back to what I was saying about Professor Pig, or if you wanted to chuck another villain in there like Zsasz, the reason why I don't think they would be Part 2's villain is just it would be, all while they are unique in their own way, like Pig with Dollartrons and Zsasz with what he does. It's just, it would be too... Okay, so Batman's going after another killer. Okay, it would be pretty fun to watch a live-action produced version of this, but the review coming out of the movie, as cool as it would still be, would be like, it's a bit like, was any new ground truly tread there? But what can be tread with new ground is a character like this, and that is a villain who is very compelling just through his very difference between that of other Rogues Gallery villains. Mr. Freeze is, as we know, I shouldn't really need to go on about this, but he's different from Riddler, Joker, Killer Croc. This is a man who I think could, don't get me wrong, want to do anything by any means necessary to save his wife, Nora. Drawing compassion and empathy out of Bruce to be like, and also rethink his position, because it reminds me of a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it here, for what Matt Reeves said about how Selina kind of threw a wrench in Batman's works at the time, because he viewed the world as black and white. You're either good or you're bad, period. But Selina is a bit of both in a way, but he's like, I like you, so Windows shut down kind of moment. It broadened Bruce's horizons, the fact that Selina came into his life. Also, up until that point, God knows who he's faced, but some scumbags, Joker. He's also now dealing with the Riddler, but now he's going to encounter someone, hypothetically here, if it was Mr. Freeze, as per the most popular voted by you guys, who would be like, oh, the more he learns as he investigates, noir detective style in the Batman Part 2, the more it'll be like, damn. I do think it would encourage more different angles for Bruce Wayne to tackle the situation. And, that wouldn't negate any actual physicality in the movie as well, because Mr. Freeze could be quite a threat there, potentially. Maybe he hires people to work for him, so there could be a lot of goons involved. Or while, there can be killings taking place, even from Victor. I mean, again, by any means necessary, I'm going to save my wife. So if people get in my way, they might end up dead. But the core of the villain just being kind of, and I'm not saying Riddler was simplified to, I'm just going to kill people for the sake of it. But I think you guys can truly gather that this next villain needs to be compelling in a different way, even if there are some similarities there. Now, this might not even be Mr. Freeze, obviously. There are other villains in the Rogues Gallery that can draw, a different approach from Bruce. But Mr. Freeze is, at the end of the day, the most popular voted villain. Now, my personal pick here, because I guess, oddly enough, I didn't partake in this poll, but option number one is I would be happy, I think, and I truly believe this, with whoever Matt Reeves went with. Now, yes, I'm a fully self-realized Matt Reeves fanboy, but because of the way he handled the first movie, whether it was Freeze, Scarecrow, Hush, Ventriloquist, or even Victor Zsasz or whoever it was, I would trust his instincts and what story he saw potential in there when we get that first article and everyone's judging it for like, oh, I didn't expect him to choose that villain. I'd be like, let him cook. Just simply that. I would have that much faith in whatever he was striving towards. I don't think he would choose anyone out of deliberate, oh, this is going to be us. I can't comprehend that. But if I had to pick out of these next two answers, one for if Reeves does adapt a more fantastical villain, and then my second answer would be my pick for if he goes for a less fantastical villain of whom could be adapted. So if Matt Reeves was, for the second movies, the Batman Part 2, to pick a fantastical villain to ground in a way, as he says himself, to make that work here, well, yes, if I had to choose, it would also be Mr. Freeze. And I think that's the first time I've said that, but I'm still kind of copping out because I'm giving you multiple answers here. So strictly, with unwinding the fantastical, maybe walking the line of the fantastical a little bit with a few unrealistic aspects, my pick would be Victor Freeze. I would die to see that story on the screen. I think, as Matt Reeves said, it could be really something powerful with his love for his wife and the motivations there. And it would be really cool to see how he would actually try and bring that to a grounded world and not make it seem lame, like everyone seems to think that it just can't be done without completely crucifying what that character is or who he is and how he actually appears in most of the ways we've seen him before. But if Reeves was indeed to adapt a less fantastical villain, so like, Riddler in the first movie, one that can be pretty damn easily believed, my pick would be Jonathan Crane, Scarecrow. I think, for the reasons I think everyone knows, even though we have seen him before, a whole movie that is truly about Crane, so no, not in, collaboration with Ra's al Ghul or the League of Shadows like Batman Begins was, but truly, this is about Crane. I would just die to see Batman with that lens. It's not necessarily a fantastical world, but I think we can all agree that Matt Reeves' Gotham isn't what Nolan's New York and Chicago is, so there's such a comic book look to the Gotham, or while it's a grounded universe. So Robert Pattinson's Batman being under the trip of the fear toxin and still putting one foot in front of the other and persevering at, I don't know, whatever the climax of the movie is, it would just be insane. I can imagine the cinematography from Greg Fraser there. It would just be, oh my god, it would be nuts. So we'd love to know who your pick is. Now, as I promised at the end of this video, I very quickly wanted to go over some other mentions, even though, as I said, most of the other comments in the poll weren't suggesting other villains. They were just saying, hey, here's why I chose this top character that's already in the list. So I had to put Joker out there, obviously. But the reason why I didn't list him as one of the main options is because I still wouldn't say he's one of the most talked about options compared to Freeze, Hush, Clayface, etc., etc. Because even though we know he could appear in the Batman Part 2, I think a lot of people mostly agree that he wouldn't be the main villain. So if he ever does get that role, it could be like a Part 3 main villain appearance. But Part 2, I don't think any of us are expecting a full-on Joker kind of Dark Knight repeat of, okay, we're featuring the Joker in the second movie as the big bad. Then, of course, there's Penguin as Kingpin as an actual option for the big bad of the Batman Part 2, because the evolution of his power will be for sure something to be reckoned with for Batman, but he still might not be the new main villain character, so to speak, but could very much so band in with whoever the big bad is. Other mentions were, and again, this is very few, but out of the ones that I did see was Mad Hatter was a top pick for a couple of people who commented, such as Kenny here, saying Mad Hatter, no questions asked. A movie involving dream sequences / hypnotic states in Wonderland, similar to Arkham, would be incredible visuals, and because Matt Reeves wants a more grounded world, Mad Hatter could be the right amount of theatrical, but still plausible, which is true. You could do some trippy stuff there in a Scarecrow-esque kind of way. Now, of course, somebody out there, maybe one or two people mentioned the Court of Owls, but it was more mentioned in how they would only still want more of a setup or a build-up, so not recognizing them as per se a Batman Part 2 villain or the main villain, but perhaps the third and final movie in the trilogy. Then, of course, there's Hugo Strange, a couple for the Dollmaker, which I have to say, the Dollmaker would be insanely creepy, using, the skin of victims to create his own dolls to do his bidding, I guess you could say. But in my opinion, similar to Professor Pig or Victor Zazzle, while I can't rule out other killery, creepy characters, it just doesn't feel like the immediate follow-up to the first movie. But I think I'm going to end this rambly video there, guys. I just wanted to really go head over heels into the villain for the Batman Part 2, and it's always fun to kind of bookmark videos and chat discussion sessions that we have like this for when that Deadline, Variety, Forbes, whatever article comes out in the next several months, believe it or not. We're just gonna have to wait and see who it does indeed turn out to be versus who everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people voted for. But enough from me. Let me know your thoughts on everything I had to say. Like this video if you did enjoy it. Consider subscribing for more the Batman universe content. But just, again, thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat Family, in the next video. Goodbye.